Okay, we're ready to get started. I want to thank the elders for an opportunity to come up here and speak. It's been a long time for me. I actually missed out. I was scheduled to preach, I think, March of 2020. And just as I was getting worried that I was not starting my lesson preparation early enough, all the COVID stuff happened, and then we weren't meeting in the building, and I didn't have to worry about it anymore for a while. I also want to thank Mark for giving me a little extra hype this morning. I don't know what kind of treat you're going to get tonight. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to start off tonight with, actually a drink of water, but a song lyric that I picked up from a song that was released recently. What's wrong with me? Is there somebody else inside my head that doesn't want me to be happy? And the rest of the song is not this depressing. But I picked up on this specific lyric, and it made me think that there are a lot of people in the world that have this thought, that I just can't find happiness, that what I'm doing is not making me happy, and I just try over and over and over again, and nothing's working. And I think as Christians we can follow into this trap as well. And so what I'm going to attempt to do tonight is to look at where I think we can find some happiness. And but we're going to look in an unusual place. We're going to look in the book of Ecclesiastes. So we had actually again before COVID. We had a Bible class, and it was funny to see Nick and Shelley here this morning because it was at their house. And we actually had the class with Danny Matchniff, over FaceTime. So he was the teacher, he was on the screen, and we had the class there, and we were talking about Ecclesiastes. And so we all had the assignment to read the entire book from start to finish before the class started. And one of the first questions in the first class was, what did you think of the book? What was your impression of the book? and the rest of the class, they spoke up, and the answer they gave was, it's really depressing. It's a really depressing book. And it actually caught me by surprise, and that's why it's kind of stuck in my head until today. Because that wasn't my impression. That wasn't how I felt when I read the book. I think it's definitely easy to look at a lot of what the book has to say and find that it can be depressing. But I think, and what I'm going to propose tonight is if we look at it right, there's actually quite a bit of happiness that we can find in the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay, so starting in the first chapter, we're going to be introduced to the preacher. And I'm going to read the first chapter and part of the second chapter. And I'm not going to have it up on the overhead, so if you want to get your Bibles out and follow them along. I'm going to read down to verse 11 of chapter 2. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place it rises there again. Blowing toward the south, then turning toward the north, the wind continues swirling along and on its circular courses the wind returns. All the rivers flow into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with hearing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. And is there anything of which one might say, see this, it is new? Already it has existed for ages, which were before us. There is no remembrance of earlier things, and also of later things which will occur. There will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. And I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I realize that this also is striving after wind. Because in much wisdom there is much grief, and in increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure, so enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish? I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives. I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Also I possessed flocks and herds, larger than all who had preceded me in Jerusalem. Also I collected for myself silver and gold and treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines. Then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased before all of my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. And verse 11, thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun. So the preacher starts off by giving us his qualifications for what he is going to present in the rest of the book, and why we should listen to him when it comes to what is worthwhile in this life. And he tells us how rich and powerful he is, or was. He is so rich and powerful that he has the ability to enjoy everything that this life has to offer. He builds palaces, he plants orchards, male and female servants. He's got so many servants that those servants are having children of their own. But then he concludes all of this by saying again, in verse 9 and 10, "And I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not restrain my heart from any pleasure, for all my heart was pleased in all my labor, and this is my reward for all my labor." So he spent a lifetime, and he tried it all. He tried it all, and what does he find? He finds that it was all vanity. It was all worthless. So we're actually going to spend some time here in the beginning to look at three themes that the preacher presents to us in the rest of the verses, verses in this book. The first theme that he brings up is that life is not fulfilling. We can look just a little bit further down in chapter 2 from where we stopped reading. "I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled, and used my wisdom under the sun. This all is vanity." So the preacher realizes that even though he spent all this work and all this effort to collect all these material things, that in the end he's just going to have to leave it to somebody else. He can't take it with him. Chapter 5 and verse 10, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity." Chapter 6 and verse 7, "All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied." Chapter 5, "As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind?" And one more. Ecclesiastes, back in chapter 2. "For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool." We can see why the preacher hated his work. It brought no lasting satisfaction. There was never enough. And what was left over got handed to someone else who didn't work for it. And in the end, nobody remembered anything he accomplished. And eventually he will be long forgotten. Theme number 2 that he brings out in these verses. Life is not going to be fair. Let's look in chapter 9. "It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and to the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears as he who shuns an oath." So he's bringing out that the same things are going to happen. The same things in this life are going to happen to the good and to the evil. Chapter 7 and verse 15. "In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing." And this is backwards. This is not the way it should be. A righteous man should prolong his life, and the wicked should perish in his wickedness. But that's not the way this life works. We see in chapter 8, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it also happens according to the deeds of the righteous. And I said, this also is vanity. And one more in chapter 9. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. We can see that if we expect this life to turn out as what we consider fair, we're going to be quite disappointed. Bad things just happen. We hear about the earthquake in I think it was the Philippines, flooding in the east. These things just happen. Cancer can come. Cancer doesn't care if you're righteous or wicked. These things just happen. We also see that the preacher is going to bring out that life is short. Ecclesiastes chapter 6. For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? And then in chapter 9, for man does not know his time, like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare. So the children of man are snared in an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. Some of us will get to see a ripe old age, and some of us won't make it that far. We've all seen it happen before, but either way, there is no prolonging this life past what God has given us. And there is no guarantee the righteous will live longer than the wicked. So what can we do? There is no lasting satisfaction. Living a righteous life doesn't give us security or fairness, and even a long life is over too soon and quickly forgotten. If this is where the preacher stopped, if this is the only thing that he had to share with us in the book of Ecclesiastes, then this book would truly be depressing. But he doesn't stop there. I've only presented a few of the scriptures covering some themes that he repeats over and over again in the book. But he also has some positive messages for us. The first one we can do is look at what we've done, look at what we've covered so far. We know from the scriptures we looked at so far that life is not going to be fulfilling, it's not going to be fair, and it's going to be too short. We can use this. These are tools that we can use ourselves. If we can use this to prepare ourselves, if we can use this to set our expectations of this life. If we go about our lives looking for the satisfaction in these earthly things, or if we're waiting for life to be fair or to work out the way we think it should, we're going to run into severe disappointment. If we can use what the scriptures here, if we can truly in our minds set expectations for this life, then when these things do happen, we can be prepared. We can prepare ourselves mentally. And so when these tragedies do happen, they won't break us. If we can keep in mind that ultimately our lives are not in our control, and our faith cannot be built on the assumption that our lives will turn out the way we plan, then we can be better prepared for what will come at us in this life. But like I said, he also has some positive advice for us in this book. And one is to enjoy a simple life of work. Let's look at some more scriptures. Back in chapter 2, there's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? In chapter 3, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. And again, a little bit further down in chapter 3. So I saw that there is nothing better than a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? And in chapter 8, I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful. For this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. And there was a lot more verses. As of the themes that I present tonight, this is probably the most overwhelming theme that he brings out in the book. It is very repetitious. I only picked a few scriptures to put up on the screen for you tonight. The simplest thing we can do in this life is eat and drink. Everybody has to eat, even the baby fresh out of the womb. But I don't think the preacher is proposing that eating is the path to happiness. But I think he's proposing that enjoying something as simple as eating can bring us happiness. The simple feeling of a full belly, the feeling of a nice sunny day, or maybe for us, a nice rainy day. Simple time spent with loved ones. The simple things in life that we all tend to take for granted. Those are the things we should be finding our enjoyment in. But he also pairs this enjoyment with work. In every one of these verses, it's eat and drink and find enjoyment or find pleasure in your toil. Everyone's got work to do. Once we reach a certain age, we've all got work, whether we've got an employer or not. We've all got work that we have to do, and that'll continue on and on until we reach the end. Even when we don't like the work we've got to do, we can find simple joy and accomplishment in getting it done. He's also going to remind us of one more thing, to enjoy the good times. In chapter 7, in the day of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. So the good times and the bad times, they both come from God. in chapter 11, so if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. So rejoice in the years. It talks about the rejoicing, he talks about the days of darkness, he talks about adversity. They're both going to come, the good times and the bad. They're both going to come. So while we can, enjoy the good times, because we know that the bad times will be there too. So as the book comes to a close, the preacher spends so much of his time explaining all these different things, all the things that we've looked at, and many more in the book that will just not bring us happiness. They are, like he says, a vanity or a waste of our time. And so he presents a thorough argument on why the things of this life, or as he calls it, the things under the sun, are not going to bring us the happiness that we're looking for. So at the last two scriptures of the book, the end of the matter, all has been heard. And so he has explained everything. He's given us the good, he's given us the bad. And this is the final logical conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. And that's it. That is the conclusion. After all the arguments, this is the only conclusion that the author can bring to us. The world strives to prove to us that we are missing out on this life. We're missing out on all the good things. Whether it's the partying, or whether it's the expensive vacations, or the new toys, whatever it's be, that we're missing out. When Ecclesiastes gives us ample proof that it's quite the opposite. That the world is missing the point, wasting the few years they have chasing after vanity for those that refuse to fear God. The preacher tried it all and found it was all a waste. I personally find great assurance in knowing that as long as I am following God, I am on the right track. That I can know that I'm not missing out and I'm not wasting the few years of my life. A simple life committed to God is the only happiness this life has to offer. And of course will pay off in the next life. And that is why Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books. And that is the end of the lesson. So now we're going to offer the invitation for anyone who has any need, if you'd like to come forward while we stand and sing.